All right, welcome back to Alabama Gristmill. Thanks for joining us. I am the host, Mike Causey, and co-host Donna Causey. How you doing today?
Doing good. It's
doing
a pretty
good.
day. Pretty sunny days make me feel good.
Yes, as they do all. I think we could probably write a song about that.
Yeah, I think that would be good. I love sunshine.
I don't get the song off the top of my head either.
I can't think of one either.
We're back here with a story. Of Alabama town and Alabama history that you may not have known about. There's now a ghost town of Belafonte, Alabama, up in the northeastern side of Alabama.
Yeah, we go from the south and the north all over the place sometimes.
If you've been in the northeast part of Alabama, you may not know where the town is, but you've definitely seen it from a distance because it's the home of a now defunct nuclear power plant. So you've seen the cooling
it never
towers.
really got started. It's a Bellefonte Nuclear Generating Station. You see a bunch of towers and stuff there.
You can see the cooling towers up there, and if you wonder where that was or that happened, that was a nuclear plant that never got online and is now defunct, and then that's where this town is, a ghost town.
Exactly.
Of Belafonte. Well, we want to go ahead and, like we said, we don't have commercials or anything like that with the podcast. But we do often mention how we kind of keep things going and get the support, and that's through the patronage program. And, we mentioned that, and you can become a patron for less than a cup of coffee a month, and it helps keep things going here, and it really just keeps the history, enables us to bring the history out.
Right. It keeps everything going, really. It keeps the website and everything going everywhere. So
and all the research you do and all that. But in addition to that, you can become a patron by going to the website alabamapioneers.com and clicking on the Become a Patron button. But another way you can support us is we have a series of books called the Alabama Footprints books, and you can find those. And those are a little similar in the tone of the stories that we're talking about here on the podcast. You can find those in there and a lot more. And we basically broke them up into different eras in Alabama history.
Yeah, it's kind of chronological. You can see the different eras that come along. We're up to about 1836 now. We'll be going on further in the future.
Well, that's a very specific date. I like that. 1836. It's 234. PM. We're up in the early 1800s, I would say.
But if you want to know what happened, we've been going along. Our bicentennial like that is in December 1819. So, and
I'm kind of joke around, but I guess it is important for a story in our genealogy like what you do is to get the exact dates. So,
oh yeah, you do.
That's why you know them.
That's how I got started in all this anyway, is with genealogy. Then I grew to like the stories more than anything else. I guess is what it amounts to. And that's what we're doing, is sharing all these stories that you run across a bunch of them. And just doing a little bit of research that, you never heard about and in the history books. And because I guess you have to just pick and choose. When you're writing a long history like that, you got to pick and choose what you think's important. And what you think's important may not be as interesting to some people, but you got to get the main facts, I guess, about the history of the state. But you skip a lot of good stories that way. That's what we're trying to get out.
Yeah, and those books, you can find those books with the stories if you like to give them as a gift or something like that. They're great for that. You can find them on Amazon.com, of course, as anything else you can find in this world. Available in bookstores, and if they don't have it, you can request those books. And all those purchases of those books go directly back into what we're doing here at Alabama Pioneers and Alabama Gristmill. So we really appreciate that. Well, let's go ahead and get into the story here of the ghost town of Belafonte, Alabama.
All righty. Belafonte is a ghost town, like you said, in Jackson County, Alabama. And it's near the site of the Bellefonte Nuclear Generating Station. It's located roughly 2 miles southeast of Hollywood, Alabama, if that gives you some more bearings of where it is. In ante-bellum days, and in fact, up to 1868, Belafonte was the capital of Jackson County, and it was the county seat and chief town of Jackson County. So now to go to a ghost town, this is kind of interesting what happened to it. 1 mile south of the railroad, it was surrounded by rich agricultural country and some handsome Brick business houses and beautiful residences were seen with beautiful shaded trees encircling a large square. It was an old-fashioned, ideal southern town, and Belafonte in its day was where people came when they needed to educate their children, get together with their fraternity brothers, or hear a good rousing sermon. And also the doctors a lot of them were located there. They'd have their flintlocks repaired or collect their nephew coming in from the stage from Knoxville. 1 mile south of the railroad, Belafonte was surrounded by rich agricultural country. Historians think the land around Belafonte attracted more people and investment of money and effort than most of the other land in the country because there was a clear deed could be made to protect improvements from speculators before such title was available for public lands. That's because in the Treaty of February 27, 1819, when the Cherokees ceded land that is now part of Jackson County, Alabama, north of the Tennessee River, it also provided for the reservation of 640 acres of land in the ceded area to be held in fee simple for certain specifically named persons. But one of those persons was James Riley, who in this manner came into the possession of the land on which Belafonte was eventually established. And so he got the land free and clear. On December 13, 1819, an act of the Alabama legislature created Jackson County out of the Cherokee cession, and at the same time fixed a temporary county seat at Salta Cave. Under the terms of the treaty, the ceded area would be protected from intrusion by settlers until January 1st, 1820. So James Riley was in pretty good shape for about a year there because nobody could come in, no other settlers could come in. But in 1820, people began to settle on the public land in various places around the county. And among the earliest people to settle in the vicinity of the future town of Belafonte were Dr. George Washington Higgins and Mr. Stephen Carter. On October 3rd, 1820, James Riley bound himself in penal bond for the sum of $13,000 to George W. Higgins and Stephen Carter, and this bond would be void when the following conditions were met. Higgins and Carter had to pay him $6,500 in specified installments to be completed by the year 1824. And then Riley signed over his 640-acre reservation to them. So the land that he got free and clear went to Higgins and Carter. On the strength of this bond, Higgins and Carter founded, surveyed, and laid out the town of Belafonte. Belafonte's name was a subjective description consisting of the French words belle, meaning beautiful, and fonte, meaning fount, and was named for a nearby spring that would supply the town's water for many years. On December 15, 1821, the legislature incorporated the town of Belafonte and included the 60 acres, and by 1822, the new town of Belafonte was chosen as the temporary seat of justice for Jackson County. It remained the Jackson County seat from 1821 to 1859, so it's a number of years that it was the county seat. During the first quarter of 1823, an official survey of public land in Jackson County was undertaken, and plats were submitted to the General Land Office. This signified that the lands were ready for public auction, so the people came in and ready to be part of that auction. However, on January 1st, 1823, the Alabama legislature approved a memorial to be sent to Congress requesting a postponement of the sale of lands in Jackson and Decatur counties. They were having troubles with people coming in, speculators coming in, and the preemption rights for the settlers on the public lands. Until the public lands were sold, the persons settled on them were in effect squatters and subject to removal and loss of their crops and improvements at any time. So they didn't want to sell land that had squatters on it. It was just a mess at that time. Congress granted the postponement, but denied the pre-exemption rights, which the squatters tried to get, and said since they were there first. And so the Alabama legislature appointed 5 commissioners for Jackson County in an act of December 24th, 1824. The act set forth guidelines for the establishment of the county town and erection of county buildings. However, something delayed the plans again, and a permanent courthouse and jail were not built in Belafonte until about 1828. So there were a lot of little delays in those 8 years since the land had been opened up. During the following decade, a post office, courthouse, and a church were constructed. A post office was established in 1830, and George W. Higgins, who was a physician, a stagecoach line extended from Knoxville, Tennessee to Huntsville, Alabama in 1820 and ran parallel to the Tennessee River on its north bank. On July 20th, 1827, Higgins and Carter finished paying and had a sound claim to the land owned by James Riley. Since Riley had died by this time, they petitioned the administrator of the estate, Jane Riley, for the conveyance of the title to them. In 1830, they sold lots in Belafonte, so it was really beginning to grow at this time. And in other parts of Riley's reservation, the land on which Higgins and Carter had a claim drew more people and investment of money and effort than other lands in Jackson County because of that clear title, which was not complicated by settlers or squatters claiming preemptive rights. In 1833, the population was 320, and by 1844, the population had grown to 400. Early records mention 2 stores made of brick, 2 blacksmith shops, a frame building known as a workshop, saddler's shop, wagon shop, tanyard, and a jail. There was also a school called the Bellefonte Academy, we can find mentioned in ODs. Robert T. Scott, the founder of Scottsboro, though, came to Belafonte from Huntsville in the early 1830s, and either purchased or built an inn called the Bell Tavern and operated it for a while. Another inn, the Mansion Hotel, was operated by Major Robert A. Eaton in the early 1830s. Daniel M. Martin also operated the Stagecoach Inn, which he built in 1845. So you see, he may have owned the Jackson Inn also, but you can see there are a lot of inns, places for people to come when they visited the area. In the early 1840s, Jackson County was stricken with a series of epidemic diseases which persisted over several seasons. The yellow fever and cholera and all were common back in those days, and it took a major toll on the residents, particularly in areas where it was crowded like the towns of Belafonte. The golden age came in the 1850s, and Belafonte was quite a handsome little village before the war, with the 4 sides of the square filled in with 2-story brick houses, neat courthouse in the center, which is typical of a lot of Alabama towns. This place was watered by a large flowing spring at the foot of the north border of town. Old Belafonte was quite a political center in its day. There was a time that they had a fine bar, and some of the best-known lawyers in the country practiced there. Now, some of the names of the lawyers were Major Jim, Honorable R.C. Brickwell, L.P. Walker, W.H. Robinson, W.H. Norwood, and Colonel Norwood was one of the most prominent ones. In 1849, there was a prospect of the railroad coming their way. People in the town saw it as a twofold opportunity. It was a much more reliable way for their crops to be taken to market, and they could manage livestock as much as their cotton. They shipped on the boats a lot of times. An almost certain return on capital was assured from the new railroad. But when the proposed line for the Memphis and Charleston Railroad was being surveyed, the citizens of Old Belafonte didn't particularly like the idea. They had a beautiful town. It was an aristocratic town, and they felt like they didn't want it running right through the center of it with their square and all. So they kind of discouraged the railroad company, and they said they built a big depot 3 miles from the capital, Jackson. Well, Robert T. Scott recognized the transportation advantages, and he offered by the Memphis and Charleston Railroads. So he saw the opportunity to fulfill a long-held dream of his own. And very early in his life, he had attempted to establish a town near Huntsville in Madison County. A plan for the town had been drawn up, and the land acquired, but somehow the project just fell through. So he was not successful at the time on that dream of his. Realizing the advantage of a railroad depot being in a town, it would virtually guarantee the livelihood and the growth of the town. So he started using his influence with the management of the Memphis and Charleston Railroad. They built the depot on the property he had acquired just west of Backbone Ridge, where he'd been living since early 50s. And Scott even donated the land for the depot. That's how bad he wanted it. He gave it away for almost nothing. The track laying in Jackson County took place between April 1855 and March 1856. And then in 1855, Scott's Mill, his little town, had a post office. So it was growing rapidly. So Scott's expectations were being met as people were drawn to the commercial prospects the railroad offered. And by the time the railroad was completed on March 8, 1856, Scott had his town that he dreamed of. He labeled it Scott's Mill, then he called it Scott's Station, then he called it Scottsville, and finally he called it Scottsboro. And the state legislature was made aware of the fact that the courthouse in Belafonte was in need of repairs and that possibly a new and larger courthouse was needed to keep up with the growth of the county. And somehow this concern got associated with the idea that the county seat should be moved from Belafonte. It probably had a lot to do with Scott and his desire for his little town of Scottsboro. He wanted to get the county seat removed there. So the legislature passed an act on December 17, 1859, giving Jackson County voters an opportunity to decide whether or not they wanted the county seat removed, and if so, giving them an additional opportunity to pick the new site. Well, the big election was held on Monday of May, 1860, and the result, surprisingly, I don't know how many people turned out for Belafonte because it doesn't sound like many, because the decision was made to move the county seat. And the election held the first Monday of August, 1860, to elevate Stevenson to the honor of hosting the new seat of justice. But the intervention of the Civil War maintained the status quo, so Belafonte was still remain the county seat for a little while. Before the war was over, though, Robert T. Scott died, but his will, made 10 days after the legislature provided for the election on the relocation of the county seat, directed his wife and executors to donate lots for public purposes, as it should be deemed necessary, to help the town of Scottsboro. Scott also provided in his will that proceeds from the sale of each alternate lot around the public square of Scottsville be donated to the town. The destruction of the courthouse at Belafonte during the war doubtless reignited the relocation controversy, even though county court records continued to meet in Belafonte until November 9, 1868. The court ordered the county records removed. John B. Gordon, resident in Jackson County at the beginning of the war, raised his company of mountaineers from Dade County, Georgia, Marion County, Tennessee, and Jackson County, Alabama, and he assembled them in Belafonte, and he took them up on Sand Mountain to drill. Later, this company would become Company I of the 6th Alabama Infantry, and would gain fame as the Raccoon Roughs, distinguished by their coonskin caps which they wore with their uniforms. It is said that these mountaineers were the first ones to have the famed wild rebel yell, but whether they originated it or not cannot be said. John B. Gordon, in his later performance on the battlefield, would so distinguish himself that he would be promoted to general before the war was over. So that's a little side note about how they performed during the Civil War. Belafonte's only direct contact with the Union Army was in the winter of 1863 and 64. During that period, the 15th Army Corps, a part of Sherman's army under the command of General John A. Logan, was encamped along the Tennessee River from Woodville to Bridgeport. It was the 34th Illinois Volunteer Regiment which occupied Belafonte, and a letter from one of the soldiers on the regiment describes how the soldiers burned the records in front of the courthouse to keep warm, so they lost a lot of original records of Belafonte at that time. Sherman had ordered that his men subsist by foraging since it saved supplies and disadvantaged the rebels, and even as it afflicted the normal non-combatants. En route to Chattanooga on December 17, 1863, Sherman ordered that all the foraging provisions in the county around Bridgeport and Belafonte be collected and stored, and no compensation be allowed the rebel owners. So it really kind of devastated the town of Belafonte during that moment because they were left with little or nothing. While there's no documentary evidence regarding the exact circumstances of the event, by the end of the war, the courthouse at Belafonte had been burned, and several dwellings were burned as well around the area. An old resident named Martin wrote, "I have had everything taken from me. My land, my town property is literally destroyed. I am as poor as Job's turkey except in land." But Belafonte had not been razed by any means. There were several dwellings that still survived the war, but they were moved intact to Scottsboro. So there are a lot of old houses that are in Scottsboro that came originally from Belafonte. Others were torn down, and the materials used to build homes in Scottsboro. Scottsboro was booming. The post office at Belafonte continued for a while. In 1867, Daniel Martin wrote to his daughter that her older brother, William G. Martin, lives in Belafonte in what was left of my old houses and is trying to keep a tavern in a very small way. So life in Belafonte went on for a little while, but it was much reduced in scale. By 1870, he said the migration of the people was immense. We don't have much of a general crop. That the war on account of drought and laziness in last year was the worst of all. And then it was reported all over the country that Texas had made the best crops in the world. And so people would just pack up and head out to Texas after the war. So they he described they went off like a swarm of blackbirds. But in 1873, he wrote again that things had picked up a little bit, and they had his son was living in an old house. There was a fine store on the brick corner house, and he gets more cotton gin than it had ever been before. In 1883, Belafonte was listed in a business directory as having a population of 100. So you can see the population really dropped off by then. And the following services and businesses: 5 general merchandise stores, a sawmill, 2 physicians, a notary public, a justice of the peace, and a lawyer. There were about 11 farmers left in town. In 1887, there was kind of a boom because the population increased to 150. But after that, abruptly things declined, and we don't know exactly why. But in 1889, the Masonic Lodge at Belafonte disbanded. So Masonic lodges were very popular all over the state, and when they disbanded in an area, it really left a devastation for the community. An atlas from 1893 indicates Belafonte again had a population of 100. But on March 4th, 1894, the post office closed down, and they cannot find the town on any references at that time. Some people continue to live on the site of the town, though, in just a rural area. But by the 1920s, the entire town was abandoned, and the old Belafonte Cemetery remains, which contains gravestones dating back to 1826, while a closed nuclear plant is just located a few miles away. So Belafonte just kind of disappeared over the time. Not much is even left. The houses were taken away to Scottsboro or demolished, and there's very little left to see now in Belafonte.
Yes, it's always fascinating to me is how the ebb and flow of towns happen and they disappear over time.
But it's amazing that it was such a booming place and really doing well. But a lot of people speculated it might have been the railroad, them turning down the railroad.
That's usually the case. I mean, the railroad is the commerce and brings the people and everybody into town. It's an equivalent nowadays of the interstate, There's a lot of towns that were on the railroad, but then the interstates were built and bypass the towns, and there the towns start dying off.
Yeah, it can help or hurt. Sometimes it kind of splits the town. You've seen the freeways split towns in half, or and hurt it in that or hurt communities that way. But also they can help because you have that access.
Yeah, I just like to think back in the days when it was really booming and it was a aristocratic cosmopolitan town. And then now it's no longer. I mean, it's just it's crazy.
So if you So if you drive by there and you see this old chimney or two and those smokestacks, you know what went on there. I don't know what's going to become of the property. I mean, I think they've talked about selling it some to different people.
It's kind of funny is I was doing some research even as we were doing this and some, I guess, real-time research. But they're to show you how technology and how things change is that Google just opened a data center right near the area. So it's a huge data center. Oh,
that's interesting.
Yeah. I mean,
I didn't see that.
One of the top, there's only 8 data centers in the country. So all the internet stuff is going through there. So
maybe this is going through there.
yeah, who knows? I mean, because that's where they keep, emails and YouTubes and all that kind of stuff is located there. And it's going to be the largest, they're going to be fed by the largest solar farm in the state. So it's so it's kind of coming back around a little bit on the technology side, and
right.
And it's
that piece of property is just not wanted to be settled on for some reason.
Well, it's not necessarily the Google Center is a little bit further away. It's like 5 miles away. It's not right at that plant. It's near the actually coal plant that they shut just near Stevenson, I believe. But still in that area, it's the new railroad is now the internet.
That's right. I guess they might like that a little better up there. It's not won't be kind of smoky and all that.
It's a lot better. We got the solar power going and everything. So
right.
It's going to be interesting that they've gone from the coal power to nuclear that never opened to solar power now.
Yeah, kind of a long, interesting history there that goes in all different directions.
It was just the times have changed, but that's kind of what we're about here in Alabama Gristmills. Kind of go over the history, and I really enjoyed the kind of the look at where all the ups and downs that that this town of Belafonte had. It was just
what I thought was really interesting too is the fact that it came with a free title. I mean, this one man got the free clear title. That's what made it grow, because squatters really settled in the north part of Alabama, and a lot of towns and property up there didn't have a clear title because those squatters had built up their area, and they didn't want to, and improved their land, and they didn't want to leave. They thought that would enable them to stay. So there were many battles fought, and this town didn't have that.
And then old Robert Scott came along and said, he was keeping an eye on, like, hey, wait, we really need to capitalize on where things are going.
Right.
Then
he got his town.
And we've got Scottsboro. And that's
right. Scottsboro's a big place now.
Yep, it sure is. But we'll go ahead and wrap this one up. And again, thanks for listening. And we'll check you next time on Alabama Gristmill. We'll see you later.
Talk to you later.
One-legged Joe dancing round on his toes, throws away his crutch and hollers, hey, let her go, oh honey.